Northwestern Chronicles, Episode 42, James and the Fire Engine. As James the Red Engine sat in the yard, he felt rather bored. Sir Topham Hatt had assigned him the same jobs, and he was growing tired of it. It wasn't long before the Fat Controller himself arrived. James, good to see you as always. I need you to bring these trucks to Elsbridge. From there you can go to the water tower by the turntable. I'll get on it, sir. Thank you, James, he replied. I appreciate all the work you've been putting in these past weeks. Not long after the Fat Controller left the yard, James coupled to his train and left the yards. When James arrived, he found the station mostly empty. A lone station master walked out to inspect the goods. Very good, James, he said. Just wait here for a little bit while I check with the foreman. But James quickly grew impatient. He sighed. Why must everything be so dull? Nothing ever happens on Sodor these days. As James waited, he could faintly hear the blaring sound of sirens off in the distance. What's that? He said to himself. James remained curious as a fire truck roared up right next to the station. Inside were multiple firemen. Pardon, but do you know where McColl's farm is? We're new to the fire team and need some directions. James was stunned but eager to help them. Of course, it's just down this road, and then if you take a right up there, you should be able to find it. Thanks, replied the fireman, and the truck roared away. Shortly after, a water tanker followed. James remained excited as the sirens of the trucks continued down the road. I hope everything is okay. Hey driver, can we check on McColl's farm? I want to make sure everything's all right. Sure, replied the driver. Let's leave soon so we aren't rushing. Soon James rushed to Farmer McColl's homestead. There he found all the firemen back in the fire engine. What happened? He said. The hot weather sparked a small bushfire, but we managed to put it out before it got too big. And thanks to you, no doubt. Without your help, we could have gone to the wrong place. It was no problem. Well, we appreciate it. If you need anything, or if we need anything, we'll ask you for your help next time, James. The fire engine sped away as James smiled to himself. The following day at the docks, James couldn't stop telling Bulstrode about his adventure with the firemen, and they sped away after putting out the fire. Who knew firemen could be so cool? I don't really see what's so special about it, responded the cranky barge. I see water every day. Well, at least I helped them. I guess that's all that matters. Across the harbor on the other side, Bill and Ben were fooling around with the fuel tanker. They kept bumping it against each other until Bill bumped it too hard and it fell off of the track and into the water. Shortly after the tanker tumbled into the sea, oil began to spill out. When Richard the manager noticed, he became most upset. You two shouldn't be playing with tankers of fuel. It can be very dangerous. Suddenly he realized the tanker was leaking fuel into the ocean. The tanker's leaking fuel. Now we have to clean it up. Sorry, sir, said Bill. We didn't know the tanker was leaking. While Cranky began lifting the fuel tanker out of the ocean, Richard turned to James. Go back to Marin and see if you could find someone who could clean up this oil. Right away, sir. And James rushed out of Brendam Docks. James frantically searched for someone until he stopped at Marin Station. There was the fire engine. Hello, James, greeted the fireman from inside the truck. Oh, good, you're here. I don't know if you can do anything about this, but a leaking tanker fell off the docks at Brendam, and now there's fuel leaking everywhere. We can help, replied the fireman, as long as you lead the way. No problem, he replied. The rest of the firemen jumped into the engine and stormed off after James. It wasn't long before James led the fire engines to the docks. After containing the spill, the firemen were thanked by Richard. Before heading off to another emergency, the firemen again thanked James. Good work, James. You wouldn't make a bad firefighter yourself. Just happy to help, sir. The fireman smiled before driving away. The next day was calm on the island of Sodor. The station was empty, and James was preparing to take a train of his own. Suddenly, Isabella roared up next to the station, and she was nearly out of breath. Good thing I caught you, she said frantically. There's a fire at the Sodor airfield, and there are people inside. James froze for a moment. Do the firemen know? That's why I came to you. Okay, if you see them, tell them to come to Knapford. Will do. And Isabella roared away. Soon afterwards, James's driver rushed over to send out an alarm to all the nearby firemen to warn them about the situation at the airfield. Not long after, a fire truck sped by before abruptly stopping next to the station. A loud crank sound came from the engine before smoke billowed from the radiator. The firemen collectively exited the fire engine. Our fire engine is broken down. Can you get us to the airfield on time? I think so, but get in quick. We don't have much time. The firemen wasted no time and crowded onto James's empty coaches. With all the firemen on board, James bolted out of Knapford Station. When James arrived at the airfield, he found it set ablaze in a great fire. Flames were bursting out of the airfield control tower as the main hangar was set ablaze. The firemen rushed out of the coaches and into the smoky fire. James and some others watched eagerly as the firemen tried to put out the blaze. Suddenly, some men led by the Earl ran out of the airfield. They were coughing a lot. Well, everyone seems accounted for. But that sure was close, remarked the Earl. Finally, the firemen managed to extinguish the blaze, but the airfield was heavily damaged. Soon Sir Topham Hatt arrived. I'm very gracious to the work of James and the firemen for helping to save the lives of the Earl and the others who were trapped in the flames. Mr. Samuel here is actually a historian at Sodor College, and tells me he is very grateful. Thank you very much to all of you. I am very much appreciative. I was just trying to do the right thing, sirs. Yes, indeed, James. The firemen tell me you've been most helpful with putting out those fires. But your quick response shows that our firemen need better equipment, which is why I've decided to divert some of the funds I've kept aside for the railway to the public firefighters. That way they can repair all of their fire engines. Everyone cheered as the Fat Controller continued his speech. Although we couldn't salvage some of the building, the lives saved here are infinitely more valuable. So to James and the firemen, we say thank you. As everyone cheered, James smiled at the firemen. Well, he said, I guess I've always been a fan of the color red anyways.